So the nice thing is we have the show result function and we can pass it around as a callback. Let's now say we also want to use the same pattern in subtract up. So I'll leave arguments here just for you as a reference. Of course, you could use a REST parameter here. I'll not do it here, but what I will do is I'll also expect a result handler here. So just as in sum up here, I want to get a result handler, and instead of returning the sum, I want to call result handler and forward the sum to it. Okay, so now we can get rid of the console log statement down there and simply pass show result as our first argument, effectively using the same approach as we did for sum up. So that's what we just learned in the last lecture. If you now reload, you get 19, 142, and not a number actually. Well, we get that because of that arguments thing. Actually, therefore, we have to switch to the REST parameter now, because result handler is one of the arguments, so we try to include that in our sum, which of course won't work. So let's switch to the REST parameter approach. A good example for why you might want to use that and not use arguments, now that I see it. So that's actually not the main thing I wanted to show, but still nice to see here. But now with that changed, let's reload and give this another try. We get the right result, but what you'll also see is that I still say after adding all numbers. Well, of course, here we're not adding any numbers, we're subtracting them. So we want to change the message, but if I change it here, it will be changed for sum up as well. Now, of course, we could create a new function here. We could create show result 2, where we have a different message and use show result 2 here and show result there. That would work, but you probably see that you would create a bunch of different functions just to show a different message. Now, a convenient way would be if we could actually get two arguments here in show result. One is the result, and the other is the message text, let's say. So that in the end here, we only combine message text, and then maybe some white space, and then result. And here we want to make sure that message text is the result after adding, blah, 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 and here it's the result after subtracting, blah, blah, blah. So that's our goal. Now we just have a problem. Result is passed in here in result handler, the sum is result, and here as well. Now, of course, here we could define the messages, because here we know it's in sum up, so we always want to provide the result after adding all numbers is as a message. We actually know this here because we have our two different functions, sum up and subtract up, right? Now, what if that were a more reusable function, where we have one function that does either sum or subtract based on some other parameter we're getting? Actually, we can even simulate this here. Let me comment out subtract up, and instead here, add a new operation parameter to sum up, and therefore I'll just name it combine. So now we got this new operation operator, and here in the loop I can check if operation is, let's say, sum, and yes, you could use a global constant for that, in which case I'll update the sum like this, add I mean, or else it's probably subtract or whatever, else we therefore update it like this, so with a minus. So now we have a more reusable combine function, and we can replace sum up and subtract up with that down there. Then here pass add as a second argument, that's this extra operation argument which is now expected, and here it could be subtract. So now if we do that and we save this and we reload, it works as before, but still with the wrong message. Now, of course, we could adjust the message down there, for example, with a ternary expression, and check operation if it's equal to add, in which case we show message A or message B. But the more possible operations we support here, the more cumbersome this gets. So in the end, I just want to pass my sum to result handler. And it would be better if we could set up the message down there where we know which operation will be performed. And that's exactly what we'll solve now. Of course, we could easily pass our message if we would call the function here, but we don't want to call it here. We want to give it to combine so that combine calls it for us, so that's not an option. So what can we do? Well, functions are objects, and they actually have special properties attached to them, or to be precise, special methods here. And one method is the bind method. Now, you just call .bind as a method on your function object and you do execute this, and what bind will do is it will create a new function, a new reference at a function, which it returns to you, which will be pre-configured regarding the arguments it receives. And that's the interesting part. So with bind, you can create a function which is not immediately executed, what would be the case if you manually call it like this, but instead, which is prepared for a future execution, where certain values for certain parameters, which you already know at this point of time, are already set. So how does this now work? Well, bind takes at least two arguments. The first argument is one we have to ignore for now. It sets a value for a thing called this, a special keyword in JavaScript, which we haven't learned about yet, which we will learn about in the objects deep dive section. For now, you can pass in this here, just like that, the this keyword, and ignore it for now. Then, separated by a comma, you pass in the first parameter you want to pre-configure. And you can pass in as many as you want. You can pre-configure as many parameters as you want, and as your function supports, of course. So here we could say the result after adding all numbers is like this, and copy that to my other two calls down there as well. Now for subtracting, of course, I'll change it after subtracting all numbers. So I change it to that. And restructure this across multiple lines. Bit strange. Yeah, we'll go with that. So now every argument has its own line, I guess. So now we call combine 3 times, and we bind this value here to show result. Again, this does not execute show result immediately. It just prepares it for execution. Now, the thing is, the arguments you're passing here, in our case, one argument, will be received in exactly that order. Now, show result, however, expects result as a first argument, and we're not providing a value for that here at all, and we can't, because that will be derived in the combine function. Well, we just have to swap order of arguments here in show result, so that message text is the first argument, because it's the first argument we're setting here. And the good thing is, we'll still get result here, because the place where you actually call show result, so in our case inside of combine here, in this line, the value you pass to result handler here will automatically be appended as the last argument or arguments in your function. So if you bind and set your own arguments, these will always come first, and any arguments which are then passed in the place where you actually call this function will come after your own configured arguments. So show result will receive both the message text, because you're setting it here, and result, because when we pass it here, this will automatically be appended at the end of this parameter list by JavaScript. And that all happens because of this bind method. So with that, if we save that and we reload our page here, we see the messages after adding all numbers, and again after adding all numbers, but then after subtracting all numbers. So it works exactly as it should, thanks to the help of bind, which allows us to pre-configure functions in places where we need to pass in a value, but we also don't want to directly execute a function.